What if this world is actually one giant prison? At first, the idea sounds absurd. After all, prisons are places people desperately try to avoid, while life is something many consider a gift. We celebrate births. We pursue dreams. We speak of freedom, opportunity, and happiness. Yet the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer looked at the world and arrived at a startling conclusion. The more honestly he observed existence, the less it resembled a paradise, and the more it resembled a penitentiary. Think about it. No one chooses to be born. One day you simply arrive here without consent, without explanation, and without any clear understanding of why you were placed in this strange situation. Once here, you cannot freely leave. You remain confined within the walls of existence until death releases you. Meanwhile, time closes in from all directions. Every day removes another portion of your sentence. Every year carries you closer to the inevitable end. Within these walls, suffering is unavoidable. Anxiety, loss, illness, loneliness, disappointment. Even during our happiest moments, we remain vulnerable to forces beyond our control. A phone call can change everything. A diagnosis, an accident, a betrayal, a death. For Schopenhauer, these observations were not unfortunate exceptions to an otherwise pleasant existence. They were the very structure of existence itself. Life was not designed for happiness. Life was designed for striving. And this brings us to what Schopenhauer considered the true ruler of the prison, a force he called the will to live. According to Schopenhauer, beneath all human thought lies a blind and relentless drive. It pushes every creature to survive, to reproduce, to compete, to continue existing. This force is not rational. It does not care whether you are fulfilled. It does not care whether you are peaceful. It only cares that you keep moving, keep wanting, keep chasing. Imagine a donkey pursuing a carrot hanging just beyond its reach. The donkey believes the carrot is the reward, but the carrot is merely bait. The purpose is not to let the donkey rest. The purpose is to keep it walking. Schopenhauer believed human beings operate in much the same way. We tell ourselves, if I get that promotion, I'll finally be happy. If I find the right partner, I'll finally feel complete. If I earn enough money, everything will fall into place. And so we chase, for months, for years, sometimes for decades. Then eventually we achieve what we wanted, and for a brief moment, we feel relief. But notice what happens next. The satisfaction fades. A new desire emerges. A new goal appears. A new lack makes itself known. The race begins again. The will never allows permanent contentment because contentment would end striving. And striving is exactly what the will demands. We believe we are the masters of our destiny, but in reality, the majority of people are not living their lives. They are merely reacting to their sentence. We move from one desire to another, under the orders of a warden we cannot see. This is why Schopenhauer made one of the most controversial claims in philosophy. He argued that pleasure is not the positive element of life. Pain is. At first glance, this sounds ridiculous. But Schopenhauer asks us to look more carefully. Hunger, thirst, loneliness, these are active positive forces of discomfort. Eating, drinking, and companionship are merely the temporary removal of those discomforts. Pleasure does not stand independently. It is always parasitic on a prior lack, a prior wound. Pain is the active reality. Pleasure is merely the silence that follows. This, according to Schopenhauer, explains why suffering feels so much more real than happiness. A toothache can dominate your awareness for hours, but you never spend a day celebrating the absence of a toothache. We notice the friction in our lives, but never the smooth machine. We believe we are chasing happiness, but we are merely running away from pain. And if pain is the foundation of desire, then life becomes an endless cycle of attempting to escape. The tragedy is that even success does not free us, because once desire is satisfied, another enemy appears: boredom. Schopenhauer famously described life as a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. When we lack something, we suffer. When we obtain it, we become bored. Think about how many things you once desperately wanted. A new phone, a new relationship, a new achievement, a new opportunity. How long did the excitement last? A week? A month? Perhaps a little longer. Eventually, the extraordinary became ordinary. The object that once seemed capable of transforming your life became another unnoticed part of your environment, and so the mind begins searching once more. not because it has found fulfillment, but because it cannot tolerate stillness. Modern life offers endless distractions to hide this reality. Entertainment, social media, shopping, news, streaming platforms, infinite scrolling. We move constantly from one stimulus to another, not because each one brings lasting happiness, but because boredom terrifies us. Boredom forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility, that after all the striving, all the consuming, all the chasing, the emptiness remains. The prison remains. We acquire things to convince ourselves we are free. We chase status, wealth, and recognition. But Schopenhauer warns us, most people spend their lives trying to build a palace inside a prison. But a palace in a prison is still just a cell. The walls remain, and the will immediately supplies a new objective to prevent us from noticing. Perhaps nowhere is Schopenhauer's pessimism more visible than in his observation of nature itself. Look closely at the natural world. Every creature survives by consuming something else. Animals tear apart other animals. Predators hunt prey. Species compete for territory. Disease destroys bodies. Time destroys everything. Nature is not a peaceful garden. It is a battlefield. Every victory comes at another creature's expense. Every survival story contains an unseen victim. The pleasure of eating is outweighed by the suffering of being eaten. The joy of survival is matched by the fear of extinction. Logically, existence appears less like a harmonious design and more like an endless struggle driven by the will to live. And if we are honest, human society often reflects the same pattern. Competition, conflict, status, power, ambition. Everyone striving, everyone wanting, everyone attempting to secure relief from the pressures of existence. Schopenhauer's conclusion was severe. Life is not merely disappointing. Life is deceptive. When we are young, the future appears full of promise. We imagine lasting happiness waiting just beyond the horizon. But as years pass, many discover that reality delivers far less than it promised. The dream remains ahead. The satisfaction remains temporary. The striving never ends, and eventually, age adds new forms of suffering. The loss of health, the loss of loved ones, the growing awareness of mortality, the realization that time is running out. For Schopenhauer, this was the deepest truth of existence. Not happiness, not progress, not fulfillment, but suffering. And if he is right, if life truly resembles a prison, then an uncomfortable question emerges. Why would anyone choose to see the world this way? Why embrace such a dark perspective? The answer is where Schopenhauer's philosophy takes an unexpected turn. At this point, Schopenhauer's philosophy appears almost unbearable. If life is driven by endless desire, if suffering outweighs pleasure, if we are trapped in a cycle of striving, disappointment, and loss, then why look at the world this way at all? Wouldn't it be healthier to adopt a more optimistic perspective? Wouldn't hope serve us better than pessimism? Surprisingly, Schopenhauer believed the opposite. He thought that many of our deepest frustrations arise not from reality itself, but from our unrealistic expectations of reality. To illustrate this, imagine two travelers arriving at a desolate, wind-swept inn during a storm. The first traveler was told he was visiting a grand, 5-star palace. When he enters, he sees a cold fireplace, a leaky roof, and a hard wooden bed. He is furious. He shouts at the host. He curses the cold. He spends the night in bitter, sleepless rage. The second traveler was told the truth, that the inn was merely a makeshift refuge, a crude shelter from the storm. He enters the exact same room. He sees the same cold fireplace, the same leaky roof, the same hard wooden bed, but he does not rage. He wraps his coat tightly around him. He is grateful for the roof over his head. He sleeps peacefully through the night. The room did not change. Only the expectation did. This is exactly how Schopenhauer views our expectations of the world. If you enter life expecting a luxury resort, every hardship will feel like a personal betrayal. Every restriction will seem unfair. Every pain will appear shocking. But if you view the world as a prison, your posture changes. The hardships remain, but the constant sense of betrayal disappears. This is why Schopenhauer advised us to regard the world as a penitentiary. Not because he wanted us to become miserable, but because he wanted us to stop being surprised by misery. Most people unconsciously expect life to make them happy. When reality fails to satisfy that expectation, they experience not only suffering itself, but disappointment about suffering. They suffer twice. once from the event, and once from the belief that the event should not have happened. Schopenhauer's pessimism attempts to remove the second layer, because most of our suffering comes not from reality itself, but from our resistance to reality. By accepting the prison, we stop fighting the bars. Loss is not an exception. Conflict is not an exception. Illness is not an exception. Disappointment is not an exception. They belong to the structure of existence itself. Was there any escape? Schopenhauer believed there was, not through success, not through wealth, not through achievement, but through moments when the will temporarily falls silent. And the first doorway to this silence is aesthetic contemplation. When we look at a work of art, a painting, a sculpture, or a play, something unique happens. For a brief moment, we stop asking, "What is this to me? How can I use this? What do I gain from this?" We stop wanting, we simply observe. We become what Schopenhauer called the pure subject of knowing. The striving donkey forgets the carrot. The prison walls disappear not because they are gone, but because we have ceased to care about the confinement. And of all the arts, Schopenhauer believed one stood far above the rest. Music. While other arts copy the shadows of the world, Schopenhauer argued that music is a copy of the will itself. It is the sound of our deepest strivings, our passions, and our struggles played back to us without the real-world pain. When we listen to a beautiful melody, we experience tension and release desire and resolution, but as pure forms, not as personal suffering. Music is the ultimate temporary escape, a short vacation from the self. But art and music only offer a temporary truce. Eventually, the song ends, the gallery closes, and the will wakes up, demanding more. Was there a permanent escape? Schopenhauer believed there was one final ultimate stage, the denial of the will, renunciation. This is the path of the ascetic. It begins when a person looks at the endless cycle of desire and frustration and decides to stop playing the game. They systematically deny the demands of the will. They choose simplicity. They practice self-discipline. They reject luxury, comfort, and status. Most importantly, they refuse to identify with their desires. When a want arises, they observe it, but they do not serve it. They starve the warden. By saying no to the will, they achieve a state of profound stillness, a peace that the world cannot touch. They are still inside the prison, but they are no longer subject to its rules. They have become free. And once we understand this, something unexpected begins to happen. Our relationship with other people changes. Look around. People are impatient, irritable, defensive, jealous, anxious, quick to anger, quick to judge. We often treat these flaws as personal offenses. Someone is rude to us. Someone betrays us. Someone behaves selfishly. And our immediate reaction is condemnation. But Schopenhauer asks us to pause. What if these individuals are not fundamentally different from us? What if they are struggling under the same burden, the same anxieties, the same insecurities, the same fears, the same relentless pressure of existence? What if their behavior is not evidence of some unique wickedness, but a symptom of the human condition itself? This does not excuse harmful actions, but it changes how we interpret them. When a wounded animal lashes out, we recognize its pain. Yet when a wounded human being does the same, we often see only the offense. Schopenhauer believed we are far more alike than we realize. The faults we condemn in others are often dormant within ourselves. Given different circumstances, different pressures, different temptations, many of us would behave similarly. The distance between virtue and vice is often much smaller than we like to imagine. This realization gives birth to something that Schopenhauer considered the highest moral principle: compassion. Not duty, not obedience, not social approval, compassion. Because once the illusion of separation begins to dissolve, we recognize a profound truth. Everyone is suffering. The wealthy suffer, the poor suffer, the successful suffer, the forgotten suffer, the young suffer, the old suffer. Some suffer visibly, others hide it behind smiles, achievements, and carefully constructed identities. But beneath the surface, the struggle remains. Everyone carries invisible burdens. Everyone fights private battles. Everyone has experienced fear, grief, disappointment, loneliness, or despair. And perhaps the strangest thing about life is that none of us asked to be here. We were thrown into existence without consent, forced to navigate a world we did not create, bound by needs we did not choose, marching toward an end we cannot avoid. If that is true, then our enemies begin to look different. Our rivals begin to look different. The stranger on the street begins to look different. Instead of seeing separate individuals competing against one another, we see fellow prisoners serving the same sentence. Schopenhauer once suggested that this perspective reminds us of what is most necessary in life: tolerance, patience, kindness, not because people deserve perfection, but because perfection is impossible. We are all trying to navigate the same difficult condition. We are all attempting to carry the same weight. And when we forget this, we make the prison worse than it already is. Human beings possess a remarkable ability to increase one another's suffering. A cruel word, a betrayal, a humiliation, a deliberate act of selfishness. Life already provides enough pain on its own, yet we often add more. Compassion interrupts this cycle. It does not eliminate suffering. Schopenhauer never believed suffering could be eliminated entirely, but it can reduce unnecessary suffering, and that matters a great deal. Because if existence truly resembles a prison, then our task is not to become the strongest inmate, nor the richest inmate, nor the most admired inmate. Our task is to help one another endure the sentence. This is the secret hidden inside Schopenhauer's pessimism. People often stop at the darkness. They hear him speak of suffering and conclude that his philosophy is hopeless. But they miss the transformation that follows. His pessimism is not an endpoint. It is a doorway. The recognition of suffering leads to understanding. Understanding leads to compassion, and compassion softens existence, not by changing the world, but by changing the way we inhabit it. The prison walls remain. Death still awaits us. Loss still visits us. Pain still arrives uninvited. Yet something important changes. We stop demanding that reality become something it was never designed to be, and we stop demanding perfection from people who are just as vulnerable as we are. The world may never become a paradise. Schopenhauer doubted that it could, but it can become more bearable, one act of patience at a time, one act of understanding at a time, one act of compassion at a time. Perhaps that is the most realistic form of hope, not the hope that suffering will disappear, but the hope that suffering need not make us cruel. The hope that awareness can make us wiser. The hope that recognizing our shared condition can make us gentler toward one another. If Schopenhauer is correct, then life is not a celebration. It is not a reward. It is not a playground. It is a difficult journey through a world filled with uncertainty, striving, and pain. A prison of sorts. But once we recognize this prison for what it is, we gain something valuable. We stop wasting energy arguing with reality. We stop expecting permanence from temporary things. We stop searching for complete fulfillment in a world built upon desire. And perhaps most importantly, we begin to see other people not as obstacles, competitors, or enemies, but as fellow sufferers, fellow travelers, fellow prisoners. And maybe, in a world like this, that is the closest thing to freedom we will ever find.